Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting virtual eSAX event. I am Jared Goldsmith. I'm very pleased today to welcome quite a few exciting and intriguing guests who are huge fans and support for Ottawa's entrepreneur ecosystem, not only Ottawa, but across Canada, and anyone in the world who, let's say, I don't know, has ever watched Dragon's Den. So now I'd actually like to start the program. So I want to thank you very much for joining us on this very special virtual eSAX event in support of small business, featuring W. Brett Wilson, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, Sueling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, and moderated by Michael Curran of the Ottawa Business Journal. We have quite a few sponsors on the event, which Jean-Paul will be sharing shortly, including RBC, TCC Canada, Account Train, the Department of National Defence, the Innovation for Defence Excellence and Securities, IDEAs. And we also have quite a lot of community partners who've made it all possible, including Invest Ottawa, Strike Up Canada, LSpark, Canada Carleton Small Business Network, and Startup Canada. How are we doing? Oh, there, everybody's logo is up there. Thank you, Jean-Paul. Appreciate that. As most of you know, eSAX is all about building and continuing to drive entrepreneurs, the ecosystem across Canada. Although, because I'm located in Ottawa, a lot of people know the fedora around town. One of the reasons we've done that is we have an incredible amount of content on our YouTube channel. And we have over 600 videos on entrepreneurship and networking applicable for small business. Right now, I am going to introduce our moderator, Michael Curran, who will then welcome Sueling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, and then our featured guest, W. Brett Wilson. I haven't seen that Mayor Watson's on the call yet, so we might have to start with Sueling. I hope you don't mind. Michael Curran is the publisher of the Ottawa Business Journal and the president of Great River Media. He joined OBJ in 1999 as its editor, helping to launch related media brands, online products, awards, and events. Michael's worked to modernize the Ottawa Business Journal and diversify its service offerings, particularly focusing on growth opportunities around multimedia content marketing. He's married to Katrina and is a father of 4. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Michael Curran to the stage. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Jared. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, man, it's great to be here. There's nothing more than I like speaking to local entrepreneurs and business owners. It's great. Thank you, Jared, for what you do in the city. It's you play an important role. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Now, Michael, we're going to have a chance to hear some of your thoughts when we start interviewing or when you start asking questions to Michael Curran. The other
Brett Wilson, I think.
Brett Wilson, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I keep getting you guys mixed up. It must be the beard.
The last time I saw Brett, his beard was down to here, so I'm anxious to see what he looks like today.
Very good. Okay, well, Michael, right now, Mayor Watson's not on the call yet, so perhaps you'd like to say a few words and welcome Sueling Ching.
Sure. Well, I don't know this person whatsoever. That's me being sarcastic, by the way. Sueling Ching, of course, is the president CEO of Board of Trade. She's been in that role officially, I think, for about 16 months, something like that. Sueling has a story that she'll probably tell for many years to come, that I think she was officially welcomed into her new role either the day before kind of that March 13th, 2020 pandemic hit or sometime around that. But anyway, she's doing a great job for the Ottawa Board of Trade. I'm always amazed when I think of the Ottawa Board of Trade, by the way. Sueling probably roll her eyes when I say this, that it dates back over 160 years. It actually precludes Confederation. And I think about that sometimes, Sueling. Welcome, happy to see you on screen here. That the organization's been around and relevant for so long, and probably never more relevant, I think, Sueling, than in the past year, because the small business community has needed the Board of Trade and other important voices more than ever.
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, Michael and I get to see each other very often because we're partners in crime when it comes to Ottawa business events. And we get to spend a lot of time talking about Ottawa's economic growth and our local businesses. So And it was the day they declared a global pandemic that I was announced as the new CEO of the Board of Trade. So it's been quite a ride over this last year. So,
and how are you helping? Give us a sense of what the Board of Trade is up to these days. I know that it's a laundry list, Sueling, probably longer than my arm, but give us a sense of what some of the priorities or programs you're working on right now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the Board of Trade is really positioned, and as all our chambers of commerce and boards of trade across the world, as the voice of business in the communities they serve. So we're really acting on behalf of all of the businesses in Ottawa, every size and every sector, to create economic growth and community prosperity. And we do that by through our advocacy, economic development and leadership, and by convening and communicating and collaborating with other local stakeholders, but also stakeholders at the provincial and the federal levels of government, who have become extremely important to all of us over these last few months, as they have been the primary providers of programs and policies that are going to get us through this pandemic and also set the stage, we hope, for a strong recovery. And so we're just working with them in order to make that happen and making sure that they understand the needs of the business community to grow. In addition to that, we've been working with partners and internally working on programming, as well as with the Ottawa Business Journal, on those things that directly help businesses survive and scale. So many programs that offer grants, information, education, inspiration as well, because I know you did a beautiful job leading us through the 40 Under 40 last year and the Best Ottawa Business Awards. But we have programs that we're working with partners on to help businesses become market experts online, to do digital transformation, to have access to funding for more staffing support. And so we are continuing to meet with business and community leaders every day to make sure that we have a good understanding of what we need in Ottawa to bounce back quickly from this pandemic. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I'm sure it never stops. And as you said, just on the advocacy, I can picture all of our political leaders that need that constant input into what's happening, in what programs are relevant. So that's a great job, Sueling. On the program side, I'm thinking of programs like Digital Main Street to help Main Street businesses, of course, digitize, to increase their digital maturity through e-commerce, to websites, social media. I was on your website this morning and did an application for student funding. That's a great program. I always forget, it's SWPP or something like that.
We call it SWIP for short, but it's a student work placement program. And it's a funding program where you can access up to $7,500 to have a student work in your business. So it's a nice little insertion of cash. And I want to mention, Michael, only because today is being launched the Canada United Fund. So this is a granting program that was launched last summer, and then we had a second iteration of it, and the third one was being kicked off today. And honestly, the application form is simple and it goes within a couple of days. So I just thought.
And what is it for? What is the funding for, Sueling?
Yeah, it's for businesses that just need help with costs related to the lockdown and PPE and all those things.
Okay, cool. Any final thoughts? I think we're going to move on to our keynote presentation. It's almost 3:40 here, but any thoughts on what people should be looking forward to with the Board of Trade? What's coming up next?
Yeah, so we're embarking on a new strategic plan this year. We'll be very focused on the recovery, of course, for Ottawa, and working with our stakeholders and continuing to support our business community as a whole, with a focus on our small business community, who we know many of them have been at the front lines of this war against COVID. And I just love to use this opportunity to say thank you to all of our businesses for their hard work and resilience and the sacrifices they've made encourage all of us to look for ways to support our local small businesses.
Yeah, very well put. We're living in a world of uncertainty, but one thing is certain, which is I think all of our appreciation for small business and what they do to our quality of life, it's that appreciation has never been higher. So
I agree. And I'll tell you, I just got off a call with the RBC chief economists and some of the CEOs in Ottawa, and the consumer has a lot of power. And the consumer, all of us as consumers, forget all of our other roles. As consumers, we have the ability to have a significant role in our recovery. And so I encourage all of us to use that power wisely.
That's great. So thanks, Sueling, for everything you're doing, and thanks for joining us today. Jared, I don't know if the mayor's here, but he'll magically, I presume, pop on the screen. And if his worship isn't here yet, then maybe we can begin the intro of Brett Wilson. So just as we're waiting for that to happen, here comes Jared.
Thank you, Michael. Mayor Watson, as we speak. So over to you, Michael. Thank you for joining us, Mayor.
Thank you, Jared.
Well, certainly you don't need any introduction, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for joining us here today. I can't imagine how many of these Zoom calls that you're on a given day. It probably starts in the morning and ends really late at night. Any message you...
I was
go ahead.
going to say, I think my eye doctor wants to see me. I have Zoom all day, and then I go home and watch Netflix. So
yeah,
my eyes are hurting.
It's funny you say that. I was just researching these lenses to cut down on Blu-rays last night because my eyes are burning at the end of the day. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. Well,
Mayor, did you... go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you want to say, pass on any messages? I know that you've been a strong defender. I mean, I'm hearing that consistently, on the nightly news, in a defender of small businesses and the necessity to strike the right balance between, of course, public health regulations that are going to keep all of us safe, but also, keeping, as I think you said, keeping the local economy rolling. Any thoughts to share on a really significant day where we're back in orange zone and many businesses are opening up today?
Yeah, thank you very much. And a big thank you to you and the OBJ for the great work you've been doing in your 25th anniversary, as well as Jarrett and eSAX. It's not quite like being at the horticulture building and networking with friends and potential customers, but you picked a good day because, as you pointed out, we're business. The local economy is starting to rev up after the lockout, and to try to help it on my small part, because ultimately it's the consumers that are going to drive the success of opening up these businesses. I got my hair cut, I had breakfast on Wellington Street and lunch on Elgin Street, and then going to a local shop, I think, to buy some pasta for tonight. So I'm trying to practice what I preach, because we need to get out there and support these small businesses, because, as I've said all along, and no disrespect to the big multinationals and the online ordering, but you don't go to them to sponsor your kid's baseball team or to get the basket of goods from a company for the cancer fundraiser. We need these small businesses to survive. So I know you have a very exciting panel coming up. I'm just going to be very brief in terms of some of the things that we've been trying to do, and to pass those comments and suggestions on to the listeners and the viewers of this broadcast. As you know, we set up the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force. We have great representation from all of the business groups. Sueling, of course, is on. Invest Ottawa, Tourism Ottawa, the music industry, the Festival Network, Regroupement des gens d'affaires, so many others that are integrally involved in the economic well-being of our city. The BIAs, of course, who are doing a remarkable job on the local level. So we set that up. We brought in the tax deferral program that allowed people to defer their taxes, either business or residential. About 2,000 people took us up on that to help with cash flow. We launched the Buy Local campaign, working with Ottawa Tourism and media like yourselves, Michael. We brought in the patio program. We saw, I think, about 125% increase in the number of patios this summer and fall. We waived the patio fees. I know one a restaurateur on Preston Street, told me it saved him $7,000, which was significant. We passed a motion unanimously calling on the province to allow small businesses to open and follow the same rules as the big guys. Why could you go in and buy a flat screen TV at Walmart or at Costco, but you couldn't go in and buy that same flat screen TV at Sonic Sound on Bank Street, or that sports equipment at Kunstead Sports on Bank in Alta Vista or the Glebe. Also, Invest Ottawa was very successful in attracting funding to help with the Main Street program that allowed people who don't have the capacity to sell online to bring them into the 21st century at no charge, thanks to the support of the federal government. And I believe there are a couple hundred companies that benefited from that program as well. So we continue to work with the provincial government. We're appreciative of the fact they've opened up our economy. We're in orange category. Our numbers today, 33, which is very low. We've been in the double digits in terms of people with COVID-19 for over 3 weeks now. We have just 3 people in the ICU for a city of 1 million. I think that's a very good ratio, and about 18 or 19 people in hospitals. So we continue to work with Ottawa Public Health to ensure that the rules are followed, and we continue to work with our federal and provincial counterparts to make sure that we have the necessary programs in place both during COVID and the recovery afterwards. So that's why we continue to invest in public transit projects that are creating thousands of jobs. And just as a final note, of all 6 large cities in Canada, Ottawa is doing the best when it comes to the unemployment rate. I think we're about 6.4, 6.5% compared to other cities, and some in the double digits. That's not to speak ill of those cities, but we obviously have a stable high-tech base as well as a government base, being the nation's capital. And as a result, we're not happy, obviously, at having the figure in the 6s. But just to remind everyone, prior to COVID, we were firing on all cylinders. We had an unemployment rate was the lowest in 30 years, down to about 4.1%, and people were expanding and growing. And just one indicator that we're in the right direction. We secured more building permit fees and more building permits themselves in this past year, 2020, than we did in 2019. So that's a good indicator that people have confidence in the local economy. They want to expand, but far too many for lease signs, far too many for sale signs, empty storefronts that we need to work with all our community to help those businesses. And a shout out to people like Michael Woods, who might be on this call. He's organized a mental health Zoom call, because there's a lot, unfortunately, there's people who have lost their lives as a result of putting all their investment into their business, and they've seen it just go, bankrupt overnight. So there's a mental health component to what people are going through, not just an economic component. And we have to be sensitive and provide those services to those people as best as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for all those comments. I think, Jared, we're going to move on to Mr. Wilson now, or?
Yes, Mayor Watson, thank you so much for the leadership over all this length of time, and continue to be a pillar of strength. So thank you for everything you do. And I'm sorry to cut you short. I know people would have loved the opportunity to hear more about what you have to offer, but we do what we can.
My pleasure. Nice to see the fedora. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jim Watson, thank you. So, Michael, over to you to welcome our featured guest today. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to start in a little bit of a conventional way. We were, just to make sure you heard that correctly. But in the prep for this interview, I was talking to Brett's assistant, Caitlin, and she said Brett finds bios boring, and I completely agree. So if you don't know who Brett Wilson is, you can leave right now. You're wasting your time. For those of you who have followed Brett's career over the years, including, of course, his time in the early years of Dragon's Den, please feel free and start crafting your questions. And with that, let's bring Brett onto the screen. Brett, I hope you don't mind the informal presentation. I was led to believe that might be what you're looking for.
Expecting you to take more of a shot at my beard or my haircut or my shirt, or...
Oh, you're looking good.
Who knows?
Very colorful.
I'm feeling like I'm sitting a little close right now, though. Get back.
No, you're good. You're good. Last time I saw you in Ottawa, you had a beard down to here, almost before it was fashionable. It was mid-chest.
Let me explain. That beard was what I called my cancer playoff beard.
Yeah,
Just as NHL players put a beard on for the playoffs, I put that beard on while I was going through cancer treatments oh gosh, that was 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, whatever it was. But and I've been in and out of Ottawa like a yo-yo. I used to sit on the Order of Canada's Advisory Council, and by coincidence, I don't know how they made this happen, but the Ottawa Senators often played the Nashville Predators the night before or the night of, so I often got to a hockey game. And then there's always politicians, as you know, hanging around in Ottawa. And there's a few that I absolutely love spending time with, whether it was Peter MacKay or Aaron O'Toole or a whole cast of characters. But I'm a huge fan of Ottawa as a city and a community.
Yeah, Brett, and maybe that's a great way to start. Brett, thank you for taking the time. You have been very visible in our city, and you've always made the time for people like Jared and eSAX to lend your business acumen, your business savvy. So thanks as we kick this off. I should check in, your health issues are behind you, I should say.
Well, I've been through cancer actually 3 times now, but it's fair to say those are behind me. It's just, I sometimes say from stage, I got my bachelor's in cancer in 2001. And I got my master's in cancer in 2014. I got my PhD in 2018, and I'm ready to get another PhD if I have to. And I often refer to myself as a cancer graduate. I think it's a more empowering way of looking at things. Nothing wrong with saying you're a cancer survivor. I'm not wanting to criticize that. I just find it more empowering to use the term graduate. Like what I've learned from it in terms of balancing my life, in terms of improving my overall physical and mental, spiritual, emotional health. Cancer has been an asset for me once I figured out how to beat it.
Well, there's probably some symmetries there, Brett, between going through personal health struggles and what small business people are feeling like in a pandemic, right? That the pandemic were in Ottawa, it kind of hit around March 13th, 2020. And, it was a crisis like no other, right, Brett, that hit many small business people. And it sometimes, the mayor said, not only shook them physically, but shook them mentally, right? It's been a big challenge. How are you finding the experience?
Well, certainly last March hit us with the unexpected. In my lifetime, 60 odd years, I've never really seen a pandemic. We had some issues in terms of some health vaccines and whatnot on a global basis, but nothing that ever really struck our country that we had to think about. And I'll admit that in the first middle week of March, the 15th on whatever, my partners and I had to lay off 300 or 400 people, trying to figure out how to do that in a way that we could bring them back, because we weren't terminating, we weren't looking to pay severance, we were looking to suspend operations, and every province was different, so we spent a lot of time. And then I'm a borrower. I've got mortgages and operating loans. I'm a lender. I support many of the businesses and some of the key people that I'm invested with. So I'm a borrower and a lender. I'm a landlord. I've got buildings with tenants, and I'm a tenant. I'm in buildings that I have landlords. And so trying to figure out who's on first, who's on second, and where to go. This is the toughest part of the conversation right now. I'll have absolutely acknowledged that by the end of March, I was in a state of depression. Working with a counselor, working with a coach, and I did an online survey at the Hamilton, whatever, and I was ranked. It was a very high number in terms of where I was at relative to the problem. But I will say that April proved to be a blessing. Working with a coach and then cleaning up and organizing all of my relationships, sort of tenant, a borrower and a lender, and having some sightline to clarity in terms of bringing people back made a big difference. So April was a recovery month, and then really from May on, frankly, I've never been busier in my whole life. I have no travel, the odd trip to Toronto, the odd trip to Vancouver. I had a daughter get married in the mountains, and 150 people got carved down to 30. And, we We all had fun. I have a son who lives in Australia. He works for me full time. In a normal pre-COVID world, he comes home for 2 weeks out of every 2 months. And right now, I FaceTime him a lot because neither of us can really jump on a ship or jump on a plane, I guess, and jump across the ocean. So it's been challenging there, but so many people have figured out how to adapt. You know, again, if you don't mind, I'll take a moment to rant.
Please do. Yeah.
So I am frustrated by the federal government. I'm frustrated by the municipal government. And I'm delighted with my provincial government. That's just the lineup of things. And I don't like that. Let's just go to the first one. Politicians who travel. Who travel. I'm going to be really blunt. I just don't care. People talk about them being influencers. I'm not influenced by the travel plans of a single politician in the world. None. And the fact that there was 20 out of maybe 2,000, 3,000 politicians that went traveling, and we had this focus, this mainstream media focus, and of course the online haters, the guys living, the trolls, the basement dwellers, the keyboard kings, were just furiously attacking the odd politician who went traveling. Again, because they're influencers. Well, they're not influencers. In fact, I doubt that any single person on this list, without Googling, could name 3 politicians who went traveling. Maybe 2, maybe 1. Nobody cares. But here we were as a community diving into the fact that a handful of people went traveling when they probably shouldn't have. And did they apologize? Yes. But cancel culture says an apology is not enough. You have to line up with the guillotine and chop your head and you're done. Your career's over, your business is over, all that stuff. So enough of cancel culture. I'm tired of that too. But going back, I think we should have from day one stayed focused on the 2 things that matter relative to getting going. 1, protect the elderly and the infirm. 80% of those who died were in old folks' homes. Had we done a better job of protecting them, an awful lot of people would still be alive today. They were elderly, they had comorbidity, they had other issues challenging them, but the tipping point, the straw that broke the camel's back, literally, was COVID. So I get that. But we could have done a better job with the elderly. And then 2, the complete gong show, the great lie that we have on vaccines, the talk that we had hundreds of millions of vaccines ordered so that we'd have enough to give to the rest of the world. We're now 50th, give or take, in the world in terms of the penetration of vaccines into our population. So we've completely screwed that up. And again, without finger pointing, we have completely screwed that up. And I just throw that out there to anyone who took time to rattle the cage on the traveling politicians in contrast to the issues that really mattered. And the issues that mattered were, are we going to get vaccines rolled out? And now, of course, we've got the 2 camps. Some groups say, I want the vaccine and I want it right now. And then there's people who say, I'm never going to have a vaccine. Now, those who say they're never going to have a vaccine, I happen to be in the camp that says, maybe we provide some benefits to those who get vaccinated. Like Qantas Airlines said, we're only going to allow people to travel who've been vaccinated. Or hockey games, or concerts, or large gatherings of people. We're all going to feel a lot more comfortable if we're in the company of people who've been vaccinated. And anyone who says, well, that's nonsense, it's an infringement on my personal rights, well, you probably wear your seatbelt. I accept that that's an infringement on your personal rights, but it's done for the betterment of the community. And secondly, when I travel in Southeast Asia, I often have to show that I've had yellow fever vaccine. And by the way, I've had every vaccine imaginable for third world travel because I go to the third world, whether it's adventure or visiting the slums of Port-au-Prince and Haiti and other places in the world. But I'm vaccinated and heavily vaccinated, completely vaccinated, never had a problem. So I'm not in the anti-vax crowd. I'm not in the anti-mask crowd. By the way, I'm not convinced that masks do everything they say they do. Because you can see media and medical professionals on either side of that argument. But you know what? I have to wear a mask when I go to a coffee shop, go to groceries, and go to a restaurant. I probably wear a mask for 5 to 7 minutes a day. I don't have any problem with that. So the anti-mask crowd, I hear you, but I'm not buying that complaint. And again, the odd person has a medical exemption. Well, maybe you should think about how you get your services supplied. So that's just that's a rant. I'm struggling with lockdowns, but again, I don't have better information. And this is where I criticize the medical profession. Because the medical profession, I can Google and find someone with a degree, a medical degree doctor, on either side of every argument. Should we mask? Should we wash our hands? Should we keep our distance? Is the right distance 6 feet, or is it 6 feet and at least 15 minutes together before you're considered in close contact? Should you sign up for the contact tracing app? There's a whole bunch of issues that are embedded in all this. I happen to believe that washing your hands and keeping your distance are key to all of this. And we've been very, very successful in the restaurants that I own at keeping those open and operating. So again, big picture, complete fail on vaccines, and the mathematics is clear, complete fail in protecting the elderly and the infirm.
What did you like you said, if I followed you, Brett, on the provincial side, you said you were quite pleased. I presume, by the way, you're in Calgary, so I presume you're referring to the Alberta provincial government. What did you like about their actions?
Well, just for clarity, my business interests are spread across Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and Nashville, Tennessee. But ignore Nashville. Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan. So I do monitor and follow because I am very active as an employer and an investor in all these provinces. And what I liked was the fact that they adapted to rolling out the vaccines into, obviously, frontline healthcare workers in particular, and the elderly. They ran out of vaccines, but they got ready. They got ready faster than anyone thought possible. So it's the lack of vaccines that's missing. And then I still press our local government and Saskatchewan recently on how are we going to ensure that the people rolling in and out the door, the front door of the seniors' homes, are properly taken care of. Because the reason that seniors got sick was that it was brought into the home. Yeah. And, seniors are in lockdown. They can't leave. So they didn't source it. They didn't bring it. They didn't start it. It was clearly the people looking after them. And we needed to do a better job of protecting them. So clearly, vaccines in the front line to protect the elderly, and of course, vaccines for the elderly. So there's a rant. I mean, there's views on everything.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for, Brett. So we appreciate that. By the way, the good news in Ottawa is most of the seniors' homes now have been vaccinated. So most of the residents there. So long-term care and retirement villages. So that's good news on that front. So listen, Brett, I'm super thankful that you're with us. I know Jared feels the same, and I feel privileged because we have someone with a tremendous amount of business experience and business savvy with us today. So in an ideal world, Brett, I'm just asking questions that show up in the Q&A, and I'll stay out of it, so to speak. So I am watching that is all to say that.
So Michael.
Yes.
Given that I blew away the first 10 minutes with a rant, can you give me 5 minutes to give a pitch?
Yeah. Let's hear the pitch.
Okay. Well,
it's reverse Dragon's Den.
Exactly.
I'm not a dragon, though.
My pitch to everyone, and I happen to think this is a lifelong learning experience. Yeah. This is, I think, the 3 courses or classes or areas of study that are important to everybody, especially if they want to be an entrepreneur. But let's start with, I happen to believe that marketing is one of the least understood of the skills and trades, if you will. I still remember when I took a couple of marketing classes, my MBA, the cool kids were all taking accounting and finance. Now, I had an engineering degree, so I wasn't afraid of accounting or finance. I was fascinated by introductory marketing, and I took all of the upper level marketing classes. Marketing is your point of differentiation. You might be good with the numbers. If you can't sell the fact that you're good with the numbers, you've got nothing. And so marketing is in so many ways. Most important marketing document you'll ever prepare is your resume. The second most important marketing document many business people prepare is the equivalent of a business plan. It's a pitch. It's a pitch to management. It's a pitch to the ownership. It's a pitch to outside investors, but it's a pitch. And let's remember, it's all about marketing. And then I talk a little bit about the importance of understanding. You don't have to be active on every social media platform, but you better understand how Twitter works, how Instagram works, how Facebook, LinkedIn. I joke about, you better know how Tinder works. They're all marketing tools. And
Tinder, again, a different type of marketing tool, as I understand it. But
well, it's a different kind of marketing tool.
Okay, got it.
I'm guessing if I asked, there's nobody on this call that's on Tinder. but most people would be on one or more of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram,
Sure, of course.
maybe even some of those new things, Parler and Chatbook or whatever it's called. But the real point is, if you don't know how those work and how your competitors are using them, you're falling behind. Again, I'm not arguing that you have to be active on them, but the platforms are invaluable. And I'm watching politicians on Twitter, I'm watching businesses on Instagram, and then I'm watching the plugged businesses where people get sponsored. It's a matter of understanding. And again, marketing is the tool, and understanding how marketing is your point of differentiation. And I argue that these three classes, I've got two more to talk about, should be taught at grade 3, grade 6, grade 9, grade 12 in a context, age-appropriate way. And then whether you're studying to be a welder, a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, or hoping to be a politician, all of these classes are relevant because they're not core curriculum, and yet they're core skills. So number one, marketing. And there's so many ways of gathering marketing information, whether it's online or courses or night classes or books or podcasts. There's a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, marketing, everything I do in my business is about how does it feel, how does it look, how does it smell, how does it sound. It's the marketing effect. Second, the study of entrepreneurship. And some people challenge going, well, don't you study that when you go to school and study business? Not generally. When I say study of entrepreneurship, I'm talking about the people who've gone before. It's the Jimmy Pattisons of this world. It's the Frank Sobeys of this world. It's people who've built iconic enterprises. But it's also people, and I'm going to name a name, John Sotadarius. Who's John Sotadarius?
I don't know.
Phenomenal entrepreneur based in a place called Kingston, Ontario.
Wow.
And he and his partner, and I can't think of his partner's name, founded a business called Pita Pit.
Okay, Pita Pit, of course.
Pita Pit had 300 stores in Canada, 300 in the US. But I love telling the story. When John started that business, they had one store in Kingston, 2 in Toronto. And when they came to Toronto, they knew which gas stations they could freshen up in. And they knew where to park their car because their car was where they slept. Why? They had no budget for anything else. And it was the true story of an entrepreneur working with nothing. There was no gift. There was no family background. There was no special experience. John happened to be a chef. And he got tired of his uncle shouting at him over how well cooked the burgers were. He felt he could do his own thing. And the real point of all of this story is just celebrating the spirit of entrepreneurship, being studying those who've gone before and who go beside. I got to tell you, I worship Elon Musk for many of the things he's done. Not everything, but what a package he's put together. I think the marketing efforts of Richard Branson, nothing short of extraordinary. And so I have taken many of these people as, I call it role models or influencers. They don't have to be one-on-one mentors, but the fact that they exist and they do what they're doing has inspired me. So I'm always watching entrepreneurs relative to how they build their businesses, how they're rounding out their business, how they're growing their business. And not every business has to double in sales every year. You know, a great business that's stable and could run forever and more than feed the families that are involved as owners and employees, that's a great business. It doesn't have to grow. And so the study of entrepreneurship, and again, you can go on for years looking at examples. My first experience when I did an entrepreneurship class, when I was doing my MBA, was a group of people who were being laid off from the big rubber company that they worked for. And they were a division that made the handrails on escalators. That was it. That was all they made. Well, as it turned out, they were all unionized, and the union costs were out of control, and the attitude wasn't one of an entrepreneurial spirit. Turns out when the business got shut down by the owner, a couple of the individuals went to the owner and said, can we take over this business and see what we can do? And since the owner had vacated the space completely, they did. And they went back and they hired back most of their union staff in a non-union mindset. And damned if the case study doesn't roll out showing that people were suddenly working longer hours, engaged in product, engaged in marketing, engaged in weekends and whatever else had to be done to get the job done.
Yeah.
And so it was just the story of the shift of the mindset from 9 to 5 to whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And again, the spirit of entrepreneurship. The third thing, in terms of a topic area to study, and I've actually had some people say, you can't teach this. I disagree fundamentally in terms of understanding how people do the world of philanthropy, community, charity, and I have been reasonably successful, with the benefit of hindsight, of tying a thread through marketing and entrepreneurship. Every business I've involved with has used charity to varying degrees as its marketing spin. We have, all of the events I host in Calgary, I pay the cost of the event. You, as a consumer or a guest of the event, write a check in the amount of your choosing to the charity of my choosing. So we'll raise money for veterans, we'll raise money for adolescent mental health, we'll raise money for prostate cancer, whatever the cause is. But we let people write a check that's meaningful, that's what we ask, meaningful to them. And for some people, that's a couple $100. For some people, it's tens of thousands, and they don't even show up at the event, but they're participating in the experience. So rather than just selling a ticket and people saying, well, I'm done, I've committed, made my commitment, we invented this idea of the charity check. And we've done so many different things in terms of breadth over depth, in terms of staying connected with clients and staff and community members through the charities we've been involved with. We travel. I've been to Mexico 10 times with 50, 60 people at a time. We build a home, for sure. But that experience is really mutually transformative. We change the lives of the family who receives the home. And let me tell you, we change the lives of 50 or 60 people who go down to change the lives of the family in Mexico.
Absolutely.
And I expect nothing. I contribute all of the cost of taking the group. And what they do in terms of pay it forward is nothing short of extraordinary. And I could rant for hours about how we've integrated the world of charity, community, philanthropy, whatever you want to call it, into the businesses that we run. And they're an integral part of everything I do.
Yeah.
So there's a non-rant business pitch.
Yeah, no, that was very succinct and very interwoven, I think, was one of your main pitches too, that I've always thought entrepreneurs could play a big role in solving societal issues or at least assisting with them. That's what you're saying, right? That kind of unique drive and perspective that entrepreneurs bring can sometimes shake up a foundation or a community cause, right, Brett?
Well, I'll often argue when someone says, well, I've got a charity that I want to support as my new business. I'm going to give 10% of the sales to that charity. And my response is that charity the charity your clients care about?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they go, well, what do you mean? It's my charity.
Yeah.
I said, well, it is. But if you're going to use charity to engage your clients, why don't you do something that's their charity?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a matter of being broader in your reach. Instead of one cause, it's 5 causes, so that, again, you're looking for a way to get people to engage. And I think there's an assumption sometimes that just because you gave money to charity, you're worthy of people buying your product or service. Yeah. No, I take it one step further, and it's the engagement with our clients in terms of product, service, and client that ties back to the charity in question.
Sure. There should be a little bit of strategy, a little bit of marketing thought, a little bit of research, right, Brett, before people make those decisions.
That's right.
So listen, I'm to our viewers, I'm looking at the Q&A, and I am sitting here very eager to ask your questions. But Brett, I want to return back to the issue that's at the forefront of everyone's mind these days, which is the pandemic. I would love to get you to zoom way out on the pandemic. We'll get into the weeds in a few minutes and say,
This?
yeah, like what has the pandemic changed, perhaps forever, from mostly an economic or societal point of view, Brett? Any kind of big thoughts as to, are we into kind of an era of perpetual change triggered by this pandemic?
Well, my sincere hope is that the vaccine will take us through this series of speed bumps or waves, as we call it. My rationale there is that, we just opened one of our restaurants. You can't get in and do it. It's that full.
Wow.
People want to be backing out. And by the way, downtown Calgary is still not actively being used. We're not, maybe half the restaurants have reopened, not all. So we're a scarce resource in terms, but people are out. And we've got COVID spacing and plastic and sanitizing and distance and masks. And we've got all the compliance we could possibly ask for, but we're up and running. And it's obvious to me that people want to do that. I'm a cynic when it comes to the conversation about the world of offices has changed, and now everybody's going to work from home.
Okay.
And I just don't believe it.
Okay.
And I don't believe it for a number of reasons. One is, we joke about this, most families don't want the breadwinner at home. Things get a little crowded.
Yeah.
And there's some of that. Second, I don't believe that you can advance your career working from home on Zoom. I just don't believe you can advance your career. You can get the job done.
Yeah.
You might go up a role, but you're not going to do ultimately what we could do when we're working. Look behind me. There's an open office. We've got 12 people, and we meet every day or two with what we call the huddle. We meet once a week with the Beach Boys dinner or lunch, and we take time together. And you can't do the ad hoc by Zoom. You can't do the coffee table conversation by Zoom. The other thing is that trades, they're not going to work from home.
Yeah.
Services, they're not going to work from home. Retail, they're not going to work from home. So this headline that says the whole world's shifting from office to home, no. A few people who've been working from, and I get that some of the jobs at Amazon or Google, they can dispense and spread them out around the country. But for most businesses, the truly entrepreneurial businesses, I need physical touch and contact. And again, I'm not talking man-hugging every morning when they come to work, but it's that direct contact that we have as we work together. We're looking at, I've got someone right now searching for a bunch of the supplies and services we need for one of the restaurants we're opening. Well, when I do that, I'm not going to Zoom. I'm going to actually sit and go through the paperwork that's printed, look at some of the links. We're going to have an interactive discussion. You don't do that over the phone or over Zoom.
Sure.
And I respect Zoom. The tool works. I get that.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit of a cynic. And so the rollout, I believe people are itching to travel.
Yeah.
My daughter has developed a bed and breakfast, it's a lodge up in the mountains near Whistler.
Nice.
And they've started taking bookings for next year for weddings. This is for 2021. Pardon me,
2022. Yeah.
Because they wasn't sure what 2021 looked like. They're already booked solid for 2022.
Wow.
Booked solid.
Yeah.
And so people are looking ahead over the hump.
Sure.
I'm actually involved with the National Creditors, and the rules for the U.S. and it's state by state are very different than they are in Canada. And we have the ability to put, I think it's 25% of our seats could be filled with individuals.
Okay.
Well, we chose to start with 200, then 400, then 600, then 800, then 1,000, and we're growing slowly so that the club can ensure that they've got COVID-compliant operations at all times. And we're going to be moving to a point where you have to have a fast scan or a fast test or prove you're vaccinated to get into some of these buildings. So these are evolutions, but we're doing that because people want to get back. We are social creatures. And again, the idea that offices may not repopulate the way they once did, I'll buy that. But it's not from 100 to 0 back to 10. It's back to 70, 80, to 90% of the people will be back into their office settings. And again, why? Because we have to.
So built into your answer, Brett, is a little bit of acknowledgement that there is going to be a lot of pent-up demand, right? There's a pent-up demand for your daughter's clients to have a wedding. There's pent-up demand for people to go to a hockey game. There's pent-up demand for people with travel. So we've got a question saying that someone is looking for advice to start a new business. Of course, when you're starting a new business, you want to understand the lay of the land. So are you noticing pent-up demand in certain areas that would lead you to say you should explore a new business in this sector or delivering this good or this service?
Well, we're certainly, I'm opening a brand new restaurant.
Okay.
And we're getting inundated with people wanting to get out and visit. So again, some of it's just the ordinary course.
Yeah.
We've lost a lot of restaurants. We've lost a lot of small businesses. Landlords, some places have been unkind and made things difficult. I, as a landlord, gave people a month's rent free without them asking. I just said, now's the time. And then we got into negotiations after that. But I started, but here's a free month's rent. And I've got friends who are still in dispute going back to last March, April when they had to close. And so I think it's in the court of land court. It's in the court of landlords to be a little friendlier and accommodating.
Sure.
And in terms of businesses, clearly taking care of the elderly, providing services and whatnot to the elderly. And I also think that the world of electronics, electronic transportation, I call it less than 4 wheels for the most part. So it's scooters and bicycles and maybe it's those little 4-wheel things that seniors ride on.
Interesting.
I think there's going to be a huge explosion in the pent-up demand to be outside and active.
Okay.
Even more so in the world of the electronics. I'm a huge fan of the electronic tools. And I jokingly call them coal-fired bicycles, but they are still the tools, the electronic tools, and the future of electricity. I live and breathe electricity is one of my core businesses.
Brad, if you, the pandemic again is this super unique opportunity to rethink things. So I want to come back to you saying you're opening a new restaurant. I get that, and I get the fact that you're making a point that people want to go out and socialize and enjoy each other's company. Do you think there's a different business model for restaurants in the future? Like I'm thinking of these ghost kitchens or common shared we all appreciate the capital cost of opening a restaurant no more than you if you're opening one now. Could we not do these things in a different way? Like is this an opportunity to rethink, for example, the restaurant business model?
That's an interesting question. We actually have 3 ghosts going at the same time right now.
Okay.
We have a ghost for chicken, and Mother Cluckers. We have a ghost for burgers, Patty Shack, and we have a ghost for pizza, which is called Serious Pizza. And all of those are subsets of our existing restaurants. So your comment about ghosting is a big thing. And I've heard of people ghosting outside in. So in other words, they don't own a piece of the restaurant, but they are now directing. They're doing the work to bring people into a given kitchen and then taking a slice. So not just skip the dishes, not Uber Eats, that sort of thing, but people actually setting up to become the middleman, working on the marketing and the online tools that are needed to get a ghost kitchen running. And as long as the order comes in and the food goes out, it's a business.
Yeah.
So that's the change. Now, going back to the changes that you might see in the business world, the restaurant world, I happen to think, and this is where we're headed, is that providing some form of entertainment. So a greater platform for someone doing spoken word, poetry, a book reading, a couple of politicians on opposite sides of an issue coming out and going to a restaurant and having a conversation. And the early feedback is, well, yeah, I'd like that. Then the other is, well, what would happen if you did a night called the Bridgerton night? And if you're familiar with the show called Bridgerton,
yeah.
Let the women dress up in the Cinderella dresses and let the guys wear top hats and come on out and free pizza and beer or whatever it is. But the idea is providing additional reasons to get out and engage, because that's what people have been missing. Not just a chance to eat, but it's a chance to be entertained and engage.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the direction we're going in. Of course, that's a secret. I just shared it on social media.
That's that marketing thing you were talking about. So we did have a question relating to the comments you were making about changes to an office. And I think we heard that you feel people will come back and want to work in a professional setting. What about co-working? You think is that a thing to you? Is that a real trend?
Well, actually, we're working on a co-working space for industrial. So plumbers, welders, electricians, and early stage product development. And so it's a co-working space, but not for office purpose, but for, call it more a trade space. And so it's trade sharing. Trade space, I think is what the actual name is called.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine has set up several of them, and we're looking at bringing him in to do a 20,000 square foot trade space up in the mountains where I have a cabin and I'm doing real estate development. So I happen to believe that we're in a gig economy where you share everything.
Yeah.
And the idea of trade space, as you described it, or office sharing, or WeSpace, or whatever they're called, those things make a lot of sense at the early stages.
Yeah. As
you grow and mature, you're going to need your own space and your own elbow room and all that stuff. But I think those are, they just make sense.
Okay.
Make a lot of
So
sense.
you would kind of endorse the people thinking the sharing economy, combined with the pandemic, is going to result in a lot of changing. I think, by the way, your idea of shared space for industrial purposes, that's fascinating, right? All these kind of, not to be sexist, they're more than just men, but guys in trucks running their businesses. They all need a landing pad, likely, and they don't want it to be their kitchen counter or kitchen table, so to speak.
Well, an interesting observation on gender diversity. By the way, I'm a little disappointed sometimes in the diversity conversations because people say, well, we have to have diversity. I'm like, all right, well, let's start with which diversity do you care about? Is it height, weight, age, religion, orientation, gender? Which diversity matters to you? And of course, everyone's got their own. Well, which one's the most important? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, in the context of trade space, we have found an incredible participation on spouses, siblings, partners, in terms of women being more active in these indoor trade spaces where there's more to do. Instead of just being focused on waiting for the phone to ring, they're in a trade space where they actually can spend time. And it goes back to when I talked about in my own offices, in our open office format, we get together every day. We have a conversation about what are you working on today? And it's amazing how often someone says, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. I got one of these.
Yeah.
And the conversation becomes additive. And,
Yeah.
And that sort of thing we're finding in the trade space example in terms of, call it gender diversity. There's nothing to be said that it's skin color diversity or age diversity, but it is noticeable. It's funny you should bring that up.
Yeah, and we're making all sorts of progress here in Ottawa. I think at Algonquin College, skilled trades. So we are seeing a lot more diversity in every sense of the word these days, and that's a great thing, of course. Going back to your comment on mental health, and not to dig too deeply into it, but the mayor also referenced that if you're operating a Main Street business these days and government imposes a lockdown and your revenue goes from 100% down to zero, it not only is threatening your business, it's threatening your personal finance situation and maybe even your mental health. What advice would you have? It sounded like you, Brett, had some great advice. You worked with a counselor and works through some of those issues. So if there's someone watching right now and they're feeling kind of that mental stress is becoming overwhelming, Brett, what advice would you give them?
Let's spend a moment watching Michael Lansbury in terms of some of his conversations about dealing with depression. I think the first thing is to remove the shame and the stigma. And when I share that I've been depressed, if someone wants to judge me, the shame is entirely upon.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And we have to shift the shame back to those who judge. So that's number one. Number two is the stigma goes away as you share. And again, you don't need to share on social media, but you could share with friends, share with family, share with key partners, and look for some support. And it's amazing how much your own ability to deal with stress, anxiety, goes up. Your ability goes up as your friendships and connections go up.
Yeah.
If you stay isolated, home, working on Zoom only, those anxieties and stresses are going to continue. They're going to permeate. I do love the idea of a cat or a dog, and I've always had one. And it's amazing when you go home, you've always got a best friend waiting for you. So there's some space there.
Yeah.
And do they need a walk? Yeah, they need a walk. And so fresh air, all of those things are good. I'm not going to recommend that people try and find a chemical or a cannabis or a particular psychologist or psychiatrist. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of trying to develop your own comfort. Now, when I went through my first round of cancer, I sat with a sports psychologist and said, how can you help me be better? And he listened to my pitch and he said, Brett, you're on top of this. He said, you're in great shape. And I said, there's the problem. I don't want to be in great shape. I want to be in incredible shape because I'm fighting cancer. And where we ended up going was that I introduced in a regular way the genres of humor and inspiration to my life. And I continue with that. There's a show called Rudy. And whenever I'm having a bit of a tough moment, I watch Rudy. And Rudy reminds me that tenacity is a virtue, that patience is a virtue,
Yeah.
and believing in yourself is a virtue. And Rudy, I mean, there's parts of it I know it by heart. I cry in the same places. Like Rudy. And then for comedy and inspiration, there's a show called Amazing Grace. And I literally, round one of cancer 20 years ago, I alternated. I watched one each night.
Okay.
Then there's so many YouTube videos, there's so many books, there's so many places, but the worlds of inspiration and the worlds of humor. Those two things are going to make a difference. You don't need to listen to, no, again, I'm not criticizing Tony Robbins, but you don't need to listen to a Tony Robbins say, you got to get up earlier and you got to focus on what your day is, then you got to do it, and then you got to kick some ass, and then you got to go do some more, and then you got to run home. No, enjoy who you are and what you're doing, and anything you do with passion will be done better.
That's good. And it sounds like you're advocating the first step is to reach out to someone you know. Call a friend, call a neighbor, call a family member, and just start sharing some of your struggles, and it might be easier to cope with.
Well, and try and relieve yourself of the shame. Try and relieve yourself of worrying about the stigma of saying, I'm having a tough day.
Yeah.
Because a tough day may range. By the way, I haven't said it, but I also have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Mild form, never been medicated, but I live with it. And I'm fortunate that I live most of my life on the high side. But when I'm depressed, I need to be aware. I need to watch how I act and how I work with the people who are closest.
Okay, a little bit of self-awareness. Brett, you touched on the word or the concept of tenacity. And, you know, when I think of entrepreneurship, you think of an entrepreneur, willingness to embrace failure, to learn from failure. Entrepreneurs are sometimes tested, people that have been tested in life. Do you think for the business owners and the managers watching today that there is maybe a silver lining in the pandemic in that it has made us tougher because we've survived the experience?
Well, there's no doubt that anyone who gets through the challenges of wearing a mask, keeping your distance, working from home, teaching your kids, parent homeschooling, whatever, these challenges are greater and more challenging than what we would have called an ordinary day life. And yet we always thought that where we were before was the epitome of the challenging life that we're all going to lead. So I think you're absolutely right, Michael, that there's an element of, we got through this, the rest will be easier.
Yeah.
And I just so look forward to the day when, and I appreciate there's going to be a percentage of the population that doesn't want to vaccinate. But when the vast preponderance of our population is vaccinated, the ability to get back to the world we knew, whether it's travel or adventure or gatherings or starting up, working in an open setting, so many of those things are going to come back to us with a vengeance. We're already seeing, short of the influence of jet fuel on global energy consumption, the rebound in terms of barrels per day of oil consumed, conversion into gas or gasoline and all the other byproducts, it has rebounded dramatically, which is why if you look at the stock market in energy, you see a drop in March, April, and from the lows in March, April, you're generally going to see a double or a triple where the stocks are today.
Wow.
And that's because people are looking past the speed bump that was or is COVID.
Sure. So let's continue on that theme. And by the way, for our viewers, I'm watching the Q&A. One thing you can do is upvote the questions, and they'll rise up to the top so I can spot them. But Brett, let's continue on that kind of post-pandemic theme a little bit. One of the phrases I've heard a lot of people say is build back better. And that's concept of, again, rethinking what we're doing, either from a society point of view or entrepreneurship or business model. Does that ring true to you that we can build back better in a post-pandemic society or business climate?
I'm not going to say I don't agree, but I don't see it that way in the businesses that I'm involved in.
Okay.
And we want to build back to where we were. Maybe we'll be better than we were because we've had some time to think about it. But our goal isn't to be better. Our goal is to be back. And I run a gym. I run a restaurant. I run several of everything. But construction businesses. We have a jewelry business. And the jewelry business, which came out of Dragon's Den, has shifted from a store bricks and mortar model to an online model. We used to be 10% online and 90% bricks and mortar. It's probably 80-20 the other way. We still use the stores as our showcase, but the online tools have exploded. So things are different.
Okay.
Are we better? Well, we're not going to say we're better, but we're back. We really are active. So again, I take no exception with this idea of let's build back better.
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing it in the businesses I'm in.
I wanted to ask, you brought up and mentioned Dragon's Den. Dragon's Den was our introduction for many of us, specifically people here in Ottawa probably, to you. Any lessons that you can, I've heard lots of videos you talking about Dragon's Den, and I know you've got lots to say on the topic, but any lessons?
Sorry, this is my son calling from Australia.
Okay.
But we'll move it off. It's getting moved off.
Okay. Well, thanks for prioritizing us. Any lessons that you draw from Dragon's Den, sitting in that chair over all those years and assessing, you know, the dreams and aspirations and business models of entrepreneurs? What still rings true to you about those days?
Well, let me start with when I joined the show. It was in the early days of taking off, and I was fortunate to be there. Season 3 had 1 million viewers. Season 4, 1.5 million. Season 5, 2 to 2.5 million. So extraordinary success in the context of Canadian television, not just reality TV. Hockey Night in Canada was happy at 1 million viewers, and here we were at 2 million with a group of
sensational,
irascible characters doing what they do. Now, lots of criticisms of the show in terms of how it treated entrepreneurs. There's no guarantee that deals would get done. There was dragons who'd say, "I'll only invest in you if I have 51% of your company." Well, think about how many entrepreneurs would show up hoping to give up control of their company. Well, none. So it was a goofy comment by a misguided entrepreneur, the dragon, and it was done to get past the fact that they weren't going to make it.
Yeah, it was a good way of turning them down.
So they'd say, "Yeah, I'm not going to invest in you because you don't have." The other one that I always got a kick out of is, "I'm not going to invest in you because you have no sales."
Yeah.
Well, in my own experience, startups
don't have sales.
That's kind of
is that how it works?
And so to criticize the pitch because they have no sales and imply you should come back. Well, there is no comeback. There is no return visit on Dragon's Den. And then there was a dragon who often offered air miles in exchange for equity.
I remember.
And I don't have a bank that'll take air miles to pay my mortgages.
Yeah.
So, again, it was story.
Yeah.
It was television. Now, as much as I criticize those, let me say that Dragon's Den did more, and the group I worked with absolutely loved. I'm still in regular touch with Joe Living and Robert and Kevin, and I've since close friends with Bruce Croxon and Michelle Romano at school with my daughter, and
that's awesome.
On and on and on. There's lots of overlap. Wickerly, all of them.
It's a little club there,
and I admire all of them. But what I really celebrate about the fact that Dragon's Den, now going into probably its 15th year, has done more to excite the conversation about entrepreneurship. It goes back to the 3 things we should study: marketing, entrepreneurship, and philanthropy. Well, the study of Dragon's Den is the study of entrepreneurship. Some stupid questions by dragons, some stupid answers by people on the show. But remember, this is edited to make television. It's not edited for business purposes. It's edited for television purposes. So again, I celebrate the show as much as anyone can for raising the platform. I've heard of Dragon's Den pitches in law schools. I've heard of it in accounting. I've heard of it in engineering. So the platform and the concept of having a pitch and having someday you too will be an entrepreneur. And I remember kids saying, "I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a dragon." But again, they've set goals and ambitions and dreams. So no, I can criticize the show for some of the nuances of the editing, but I celebrate the show for what it did in terms of raising the profile. I get recognized a little bit or a lot as I go around Canada. And in fact, one of my fun moments is traveling the world as Canadians come up.
Okay.
And it's happened offshore Finland. It's happened in Brisbane. It's happened in the south coast of Africa when I was shark cage diving with a couple of people from Colombia who happened to be doing their master's in engineering at a place called the University of Toronto. So connections and overlaps in so many ways, and it's been a great connector. And I think the other thing is that the Dragons generally, I've heard this from most of them, find that they feel, that people feel they're very approachable because they're not celebrities with a guitar, they're not celebrities with a hockey stick or a baseball bat, they're just approachable business people. And so the result is all of us have ended up with a wonderful following in terms of conversation. I use my platform to provoke, and there's a few haters, cave dwellers that attack. That's fine. They got to have something to do with their lives. I get it. But for the most part, all of the Dragons have gone on to do public speaking, books, other activity, but all of it in support of the world of entrepreneurship, which again, I saw.
What's the best deal you ever did? And are you still involved in any of those businesses? Anyone come to mind?
60 deals on air. I only closed 30 of them. Okay. But while I closed 30, the other Dragons each closed 2.
Yeah, that's a good ratio for Dragons Den.
So I had a high kill rate, but the number that died out of that portfolio, 80% were gone.
Okay.
I could afford it because I had the budget to put into the businesses, and I gave people a shot. But having said that, 2 of the businesses, 320 Solutions, which is a modular builder, started out using shipping containers, and then Hilberg & Burke, the jewelry company, each of those has done well enough to pay for the whole portfolio of mistakes. So all in all, good business. And the other thing is the people, Rachel from Hilberg & Burke, and Evan and Brian from 320, wonderful people. And again, over the last decade, we've done so much together, whether it's family or travel or community, but building businesses together. And it's been a real.
So that's it. Oh, go ahead.
And sorry, there's Barb from.
Okay.
And she's as she puts it, she's the whiniest baby in the nursery. But she does perfume.
Okay.
And she's landed Sephora, and that business is about to take off. So I think I may have 3 big wins coming out of that. Again, it's taken 10 or 12 years, but the expectation that a startup business would turn into an overnight success is misguided. And I knew that going in.
And those ratios don't sound far-fetched to me. They sound like what real life, that you're going to get a couple home runs, and the majority of those businesses might survive, but certainly there won't be a big hit.
No, absolutely right.
We got a few more minutes, Brett, here. Maybe I'll ask maybe one more Dragon's Den question. What's and it's the opposite of what I just asked. What's the worst deal? And I don't know, there might be some legal, limitations. Any deals blow up in your face?
Yep.
Okay, and that's business too, right?
So one of the businesses, and I take 100% of the blame, but we were watching it, and we were watching it grow rapidly. And so they needed working capital to fund the inventory. They were growing rapidly. Turns out that the salesmen were pretty focused on sales, not on margin. And we basically, inside of 3 months, blew the company up with this extraordinary inventory buy and no sales that made money.
Wow.
The more we sold, the more we lost. And so, again, learning moment. I'd assigned some people to watch, but I never gave them a sense of what I was worried about or watching. And when I did weigh in, again, my mistake, 100%, it just wasn't working. Now, a few other businesses blew up, but it was well-intended people who I still admire and respect. I had the misfortune of losing to cancer one of the partners in a business called Frogbox. And Frogbox is taking plastic boxes and substituting them for intermodal travel, moving inside a city or between cities with cardboard boxes. So longer life, but they're plastic boxes. And of course, they'll last 10, 20 years.
I remember the pitch, by the way.
Regular wear and tear. But I lost the president. He died about 3-4 years in. And that was one of the tougher moments because he had also become a dear friend. So it's been a roller coaster of experiences. Do I regret going on Dragon's Den? Not at all. Do I regret almost trying to stay one more year? Yeah, I was working on having a fourth season, and ultimately got into a bit of a dust up on contracting, and it worked out for the better because 3 seasons gave me all the exposure.
Yeah, and no temptation to go south to the U.S. like a couple of the Dragons did to go to Shark Tank. You were never tempted to kind of get into the U.S. market to kind of personally brand yourself through some sort of similar show.
You know what? I've lived in Canada, and other than a bit of real estate and the Nashville Predators, all of my investments are in Canada. All of my family. My son's in Australia right now, but he'll come home someday. But everything I do is in Canada, so I had no reason to chase a bigger prize. You know, Robert Herjavec moved to LA, married the girl he went dancing with, and has got a new life that he's leading down there. But that was for him a choice. My choice was to stay based in Calgary, so it wasn't offered to me. And now, what I did take a look at though was doing Dragon's Den in England. One time I used to have a piece of a British football team, and they approached me about coming over to England, but they wanted me in Manchester on 2 weeks' notice for 2 weeks. And I kind of smiled and said, my life doesn't work like that. It's just a non-starter. And again, it was nothing. I wasn't going to gain anything incremental to what I had. Built brand, built profile, built the ability to share my views and passion for entrepreneurship. So it was just a business deal. And it wasn't really.
We got about 4 more minutes, and you mentioned Calgary a few times, and I wanted to ask about Calgary. You know, I have a sense, this is going to sound a little political, that we in Ottawa don't have a firm sense of what's happening in Alberta and Calgary. In some recent interviews, I've heard you unfortunately describe the downtown office tower situation in Calgary as desolate, or you know, there's so many buildings that are unoccupied right now. Give us a sense of what's happening in Calgary and maybe the province in general related to the energy sector.
Sure. Well, trying to avoid getting into a rant. Right now, most of the offices are somewhat closed, some partial service, but even those that are open, we're at 30% or at 30% vacancy right now. So, you know, it's tough to find a building that's busy. That's one issue. But the bigger picture is probably how Alberta feels in Confederation. And again, it's less about Ottawa. Sometimes the headlines blame Ottawa. I will blame Gerald Butts and Prime Minister Trudeau quite specifically. But it's the disconnect, and it's misguided in so many ways. Right now, we can ship oil from Calgary through Vancouver, through the Panama Canal, bring it down the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and get to refineries. But we cannot ship oil across our country. And the fact that we're not participating in the global market, we are environmentally far more responsible. You take any form of diversity that you want to bring up. We are accountable, transparent, and responsible. Are we good? Maybe not. But are we ahead of most of the people who have oil to produce in this world? Compare us to Venezuela, compare us to Nigeria, compare us to any of the Saudi Arabian, Middle Eastern producers. We stand on the shoulders of all of them for environmental compliance, for restoration, reclamation. And again, people will criticize an aspect of everything I just offered. But again, when we compare ourselves to the world, we are far superior. And so the fact that we can't get TMX built, so instead, the U.S. is going to rely on Venezuela for its oil supply, run by a corrupt cartel of drug lords. And they're going to supply the oil instead of shipping it from an understood source, environmentally responsible, or greenhouse gas emissions, whether you believe in greenhouse gases being the issue or not, we are gathering them under control. The rest of the world doesn't care. They just don't care. And so you don't have none of the, call it the protesters. You're not going to see Greenpeace or Sierra or Suzuki show up in Venezuela to complain about what they're doing. They never will. Nothing. You know, when a number of years ago in Sudan, a company called Talisman Energy got raided into selling out of Talisman's interests in Sudan. And the moment they sold, the churches and the others who were leading the complaints went quiet. So they weren't concerned about what was happening in Sudan. They were concerned about having a Canadian company participating in Sudan. And that falsehood, that hypocrisy is what permeates many of the decisions that are made right now. And the fact that we couldn't get a pipeline built across Canada, we're having trouble. There's this debate, again, I can get fired fired. Can't get fired because I can't get hired. But, hereditary chiefs versus elected chiefs. Let me tell you, I know a number of elected chiefs. They have this much time for the hereditary chiefs who are dictating process and strategy. They have no time for that. And again, we can get into all sorts of details, but it's the hypocrisy at so many different levels. But how do we participate in the global economy when we've got the far left fighting with sometimes the far right with extremes over shutting down our economy? Critical thinking is necessary to think about why are we doing what we're doing. Right now we need, and Texas is an example, we need coal, and again I'll exaggerate a little bit when I say coal, but we need hydrocarbons, primarily natural gas and nuclear as base load for our electricity. Is it nice to have wind on a windy day? It is. And is it nice to have solar on a sunny day? It is. But neither sun or wind are guaranteed. And yet I'll guarantee you that everyone wants to have power on at night when they go home to cook supper and watch TV. So we need base load equipment. And there's a hypocrisy that's being built into the amount, especially Ontario, they were paying some of the wind suppliers 10 and 20 times the marginal cost of electricity being produced by others to bring on this optic. Paying a premium for, anyway. Yeah. Nothing.
There's some, I sense there's some ongoing frustration with what's going on.
Well, and to finish that thought, I want to be part of Confederation, and I want a fair deal in Confederation. I'm half French by birth on both sides of my family. I have been to every province in our great country except Prince Edward Island, and I promise it's
you gotta go.
But I believe in Confederation, but we have to have fairness.
Well, Jared, I see that you're back with us, and we're about a minute past, so I'll hand things back to you, and you can bring us back, I think, to networking.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael Curran. Brett, you're such a source of inspiration. We can listen to you all day. Do you have another few hours? Maybe we can sit back and reconvene another time. But thank you again. This is the second time
I appreciate
that you've been so helpful with your time to join us at eSAX, and we really appreciate that. Especially during such difficult times the future, it's still bright, and it's what we do with it that counts. So at this time, we're going to do some wrapping up words. I just want to thank you again, Michael and Brett, and Sueling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, and Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson for joining us today. So just as a quick wrap up, one of the charities we raise funds for in honor of Brett is the Do It for Darren mental health charity through the Royal Ottawa Hospital. And in November 2010, 14-year-old Darren Richardson, she died by suicide. So the Do It for Darren supports education. Oh, pardon me?
Have we got 2 more minutes?
Oh, yeah, sorry. The Do It for Darren supports education, awareness, research initiatives at the Royal Ottawa to encourage young people to talk openly about mental health and mental health wellness issues. It never has been there more important time than now. So numbers are still to be finalized, but right now we're sitting at about a $200 donation. So thank you very much, everybody. A percentage of all the ticket sales went towards that. If you would like to make a donation, Jean-Paul will be sharing the link in the general chat. Now, for door prizes. Now, here's the fun part. Let me share my screen with everybody. And if you remember, last time we used this really fun wheel. And what's really cool about this is I think the first prize was about a 4-hour one-on-one session with you, Brett? No, I'm kidding. Okay, no. That's maybe another time. But the first prize is a free 1-hour consultation with Sandy Tunwell of Account Train to discuss your bookkeeping and accounting needs. So let's see who's the big winner today. Geraldine Dixon. Congratulations, Geraldine. Now, I know, Brett, you're a big fan of socks. I remember last time you came to eSAX, I filled your little goodie bag of socks. Well, now we have eSAX. And we raise funds for 3 charities: the Ability First Ottawa, who is here in the house today, Ottawa Network for Education, the Junior Achievers, representing and helping to support youth entrepreneurs, and CHIO, the Max Keeping Foundation for Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. So we're going to raffle off a couple of pairs of eSAX just because I have them. And who is going to be the lucky winner today? Chantal Yell, congratulations. Well, we'll mail that to you shortly, and let's go with one more, shall we? Gunraj, congratulations. And I should mention that for every pair that are sold, eSAX donates 50 cents to each of those charities, and that's matched by 2 other organizations in town for a total donation of $4.50 towards each charity. So thank you very much for that. Moving right along, it wouldn't be possible without community support. That's what eSAX is all about. So leading up to our closing chat here in presentation mode, I'd like to thank our sponsors again: RBC, TCC Canada, Account Train, the Department of National Defence, Innovation for Defence Excellence and Security Ideas, and the many students from the Algonquin College Events Management Program who make these events possible, and my friend for many years, Jean-Paul Jovanoff, who helped make this platform such a success. And last but not least, all of our community partners, including Ottawa Board of Trade, Invest Ottawa, Startup Canada, Strike Up Canada, LSpark, Canada Carleton Small Business Network. And finally, our speakers: Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, Sueling Ching from the Ottawa Board of Trade, moderator Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal, and of course, our featured guest, W. Brett Wilson. So thank you very much, everybody. There will be recordings on our YouTube channel momentarily. Well, once I get through them, it's going to take some time. But like I said earlier, we have over 600 videos on entrepreneurship and networking for small business, eSAX with an A, and I'm sure you'll find us on YouTube. So thanks very much, everybody. Stay safe, happy networking, and hang in there, everybody. There's a rainbow at the end of all this. Thank you very much.